Hi everybody, I'm Belle Holder, the host of UNCTAD Conversations in Barbados. Today, we're at the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center where UNCTAD 15 is taking place. But getting to this point was no easy task. First, Barbados won the bid to become the first small island developing state and the first Caribbean country to host UNCTAD. Sounds awesome, right? But wait. The expectation, of course, was that Barbados would be teeming with thousands of visitors and conference attendees who would be here to experience everything that Barbados has to offer. And then came an international health crisis in the form of COVID-19. Prime Minister Mia Armour-Motley delayed the start of the conference twice before making the decision to host a virtual conference. Another Caribbean native knows firsthand the tenacity of staying the course and fighting through your journey. She was born in Dominica and then relocated to United Kingdom, where she rose through the ranks in her legal career to become the first female Secretary General of the Commonwealth. Baroness Patricia Scotland is today's guest on UNCTAD Conversations. First of all, let me say welcome to Barbados. I think it's important to let people know that it was actually your native Dominica that nominated you for the post of Secretary General of the Commonwealth. What does that mean to you?
Well, that meant everything to me because, I was born in Dominica and I grew up mainly in the United Kingdom. But what happens for so many of us in the diaspora is that once you go in through your front door, that is Dominica. So I spoke Creole, the food, the people, the music, and it was always home for me. So to have my own country of birth nominated me, it meant everything to me, but also I made it so special because of my parents. And my father's Antiguan, my mother's Dominican. And for my region to do this, it was very special indeed.
Yeah. I know that often what happens generationally, sometimes you get farther and farther away from the island. How have you been able to introduce Dominica to your children?
Well, as soon as my children were born, I made sure that we came home every year.
Nice.
My parents lived in Dominica, my cousins are there, and of course now my parents are buried in Dominica. And so my children were backwards and forwards. I wanted them to be, yes, British, but absolutely Caribbean and understand their Dominican roots. And they loved it. They love Dominica as much as I do, so they are a bit of both.
Yes, nice. I believe in the power of positive examples. As a pre-law student, you were told that you should consider a different path because you had two major obstacles. That's being a woman and being Black. You did not take heed and you made your own choices. When you look back on that now, well, how do you feel? Like, what do you tell yourself all these years later about that experience?
I feel very grateful that I had the parents and family I had, because my mother and father said, you do not let other people define you. By God's grace, you can do anything that He puts in your hands to do. And so I am really proud that I was born into my family, because I think we all need someone to inspire us. And if you're surrounded by people who constantly tell you, you cannot do this or you cannot do that, to know that you can do anything that you choose is really, really important. And I did my degree when I was 20. So people said I was too young. At that stage, 93% of the legal profession, because I'm a barrister, was white, male, Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Nobody looked like me. And so people thought you could not do this. And I think what I hope is that people will look at all of us, my generation, our generation, who didn't have anyone before us and say, if she can do that, I can do that. And there is nothing that they cannot do. And we have the most brilliant young people in this region.
Yeah, fantastic. You know, I feel like the last few years have been so volatile in so many ways. I mean, we're dealing with a health crisis right now. One of the things that certainly emerged was the Black Lives Matter movement, and it was international. It wasn't just the United States. It had an impact in the Caribbean. It had an impact in the United Kingdom.
Everywhere.
What is your response to the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, I was so saddened because those of us of my generation thought we had fought those fights and that we had won, and that the next generation of black young people in particular would not have to take to the streets, would not have to protest in the way they did. So I felt really so saddened that we were still doing this. But there was one thing that made me feel happier. Because when we were protesting, when I was young, we were having to persuade people that equality was a right. Mm-hmm. But look at what happened on the Black Lives Matter. It was like this. People were out and they were saying all over the world, not in our name, not again. And so the difference is we weren't fighting about the fact this was wrong. We were fighting to make sure that other people recognized that it was wrong and it was never coming back. So I think for us in the Commonwealth, it was a challenging time. You know, we made a very strong statement. The Commonwealth is made up of 54 countries from 5 different regions. 60% of our population is under the age of 30. So if you look at that population right across the Commonwealth, we had in every single country people saying, up with this we will not put. And remember, it was the Commonwealth who had fought apartheid in a time when South Africa and racism was vibrant across the world. The Commonwealth, right back in the 1960s, were the ones saying, not in our name. Every person in the Commonwealth, black, white, it doesn't matter what your religion, your race, your creed, you are equal. And so I think it was the Commonwealth coming back again to say, we will stand together and we will not allow ourselves to be divided. Our humanity comes first. And seeking to uphold that humanity actually made me very proud of our Commonwealth and very proud that there was not one dissenting voice. And we made a statement and the world listened. But I think it also tells us you can't take your foot off that pedal.
That's absolutely true. And I feel like it's okay to be, because some people, you know, there are some that would get emotional and you're caught up in the moment because it's trending. Mm-hmm. And I always feel like, how do we take all of this charged up emotion and response and turn it into political change? How do we do that?
Well, I think what we have done is we have turned it into opportunity. Fairness isn't a word. Fairness is an action. So how do we take an opportunity to make things better for our young people? And that is absolutely what the Commonwealth is doing. And we're listening to young people because they're not just the leaders of tomorrow, they're the leaders of today. And if you have 60% of your population who is young, you have to have them round the table with you. You have to listen to them, and you have to act to support them. And this is what we did when we created the Youth Development Index. We went out and we assessed, so what are our young people doing? What do they need? How do we deliver and develop reality of equality so they can touch it, they can taste it, they can act it? And we have to be able to give them a better world. I mean, our generation have done badly. If you look at where we are now with climate change, this generation is the first generation to really suffer the impact of climate change. But look what we've done to them. They are the last generation to do anything about it, to change it. So when we're talking about 1.5 to stay alive in terms of climate change, it's not a myth for people in this region. It's the lived reality. We have had, in the last 4 years, 6 of the biggest hurricanes the world has ever seen. Look what Irma did to beautiful Antigua and Barbuda. Look what Maria did to my country of birth, Dominica. It destroyed 226% of our GDP. And what does that mean? It means when you land in your country, as I did on the first flight that could get me in after Dominica, I was heartbroken. I saw the greenest, most beautiful island in the world stripped naked. There was not even bark on our trees, not one piece of green, and so many people's houses were destroyed. Now, when you see that, and then when you see what happened to Bahamas, Dorian, that monster stayed for more than 36 hours, and the devastation, which I've just seen a couple of months ago, I went after Dorian, and I've just gone back as I'm coming here for Elsa. That is a lived reality for the people in this region. You don't have to tell us climate change is real. We are seeing it on our shores. We're seeing it diminished. And we are supposed to be big blue island states. We have 32 small states in the Commonwealth, but 25 are small island developing states, just like Barbados.
Right. Okay, so we're going to take a commercial break and we're going to come back and continue this conversation. We'll be right back with more on UNCTAD Conversations. Welcome back to UNCTAD Conversations. Today we're sitting down with Commonwealth Secretary General, the Right Honourable Baroness Patricia Scotland. You know, you were instrumental in the introduction of Britain's Domestic Violence Crime and Victims Act. And I feel as though this decade is going to be known as the hashtag decade. So what would you say to young women about the hashtag metoo movement?
Well, what I'd say is that this is a time for change. As you rightly say, domestic violence has been something that I've fought all my life. It is now, according to the World Health Organization, affecting 1 in 3 women in the world. And that's irrespective of race, region, religion, or any other criterion. And that is devastating, not only us physically, but also economically, because the economic cost of taking women out of the opportunities to build the economy is devastating for all of us. So I think this is now a time for change, and you know that we've launched Commonwealth Says No More. And in this website, we have put all the knowledge, the expertise. We've literally got millions of dollars of intellectual property that we're sharing with everyone to say you can be part of this. And we've just launched a film in the last week to encourage people to come forward and to say, not in my name. And we are hoping that this is going to make a big difference. Some of the great stars have teamed up with us, and it's going to make a difference. This opportunity for young people is vital, because if we don't deal with this pandemic, because we're dealing with the COVID pandemic, but domestic violence is like a silent pandemic which is killing and injuring so many of us, and we really have to call it out.
You know, in the Caribbean, there's a culture factor when it comes to domestic violence. So I feel as though our approach maybe has to be slightly different in the North. And so how do we deal with that? How do we make sure that our boys are included in the conversation for change?
Well, I'd like to say to you that it's a cultural issue. One of the tragedies of my life, and working on this issue literally since I was 21, is that domestic violence manifests itself in very similar ways. And that's the thing that's terrible, actually disgusting about domestic violence, but it's also the thing that enables us to combat it. Because if it is a question of power, then if one of us finds a way of dealing with it, other of us can copy. So, for example, when I was the minister responsible for this issue in the British government, we reduced domestic violence by 64%, and we saved £7.1 billion by way of economic costs. So for every £1 we spent, we saved 6. What we've shown is that if you use the methodology that was developed by all of us, which takes government, local government, business, people, individuals, by that I mean, and foundations, if we all work together in a way that we have discovered works, we can make an improvement. But men are critically important on this. And you don't want to see a father who has nurtured and loved his child and then see that someone then comes and kills that child. You don't want to talk to a brother who has just lost a sister and a mother because someone has firebombed their house and that someone was an ex-partner. You don't want to talk to the men who have really suffered by seeing the women and the people they love damaged. So this isn't a man-woman thing. Correct. It is a good person and those who don't. And the other thing that we've learned, and it is really sad, is that 89% of those who end up being perpetrators were probably living in a domestic violence home when they were children. But the truth is, and the great thing is, the majority of people who live in those sorts of circumstances do not go on and abuse. And what we have to look at is, so what is the catalyst? What makes people do it? And so we have launched the Commonwealth Says No More. I would love it if Barbados did the Barbados Says No More. We've got all the equipment. You can go onto the website. And what I want to say to everybody is it takes all of us, men, women and children, working together. And please hug our men close, because there are some most fantastic men. I know, because I'm one of 12 children, I had the most amazing father. I have 7 amazing brothers, and each of them taught me what love and care and support and gentleness is. So this we have to hug our good men close.
I agree. There, you know, your career reads like so many moments of celebration. And I know when you're in it, you don't see yourself that way because you're just plugging along and you're just doing the work that you feel is necessary to be done. You are the first woman in the UK to become Attorney General since its inception in 1315. When I read that, I had to go back because I thought I had read incorrectly. And I said, no, it didn't say 1915. It said 1315. But now you sit here as the first female Secretary General of the Commonwealth, while the first woman prime minister is in Barbados, while Nigeria's Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is at the World Trade Organization, the WTO. Jamaica's Pamela Coke Hamilton is at the ITC, the International Trade Center, and of course, Rebecca Greenspan is now the first female Secretary General of UNCTAD. Yeah. Can you put that into context in your mind when you look back on everything that you have worked for, and now we're at what feels like a watershed moment?
Well, it feels fantastic because when we look at what the world needs, and so, for instance, if you look back at the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, they said the difference from those countries who did well and those countries who didn't was investing in the human capital. 50% of our human capital is female. So how wonderful to look back and see that 20, 30 years ago, all of those jobs would have been male. And to see now that women are leading and helping to support the international push to get us where we need to be. And I felt huge pleasure when I stood not only with Carla Barnett, who is now the first female Secretary General of CARICOM, but we stood with Billy Miller. There's a photograph which I will treasure. It's Carla Barnett, Billy Miller, and me. In the past, if you think about Dame Billy Miller, she was the Deputy Prime Minister, and Carla's job and my job, all of those jobs used to be male. and it was a very special moment. And your Prime Minister is just the most wonderful exemplar for women today. She's dynamic, she's caring, loving, kind, and so smart. So I think for those who said women can't do the job, I think maybe we can.
What would you say has been one of the biggest hurdles for you throughout your career?
I think it's probably people thinking that you can't do it. You know, you spoke right at the beginning about what people told me when I was really young. And they said, you don't see black women doing these jobs. That's not for you. They thought what was for me was to be working in a supermarket, and if I worked really well, I might become a supervisor. Now, that's a good, honourable job, and there is no disgrace in that at all, but that wasn't for me. So I think it just makes me think we've come a long way, and I want all those little girls who are being told you can't do it, I want to say to all of them, oh, yes, you can.
All right.
Oh, yes, you can.
We're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, I want to focus on what are some of the biggest challenges for the small island developing states.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be right back. You have been quoted as saying that when it comes to the Commonwealth, we have to have inclusive, creative solutions to difficult problems. You've already served a full term already. So what have you experienced as some of the biggest challenges when it comes to the small island developing states within the Commonwealth?
Well, one of the major problems we've touched on already is climate change. Yeah. Small island states have been in this fight for a very long time. They led the way. The Caribbean, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, small states led the way back in 1989. We're talking about 3 years before the first COP ever took place. And the COP, as you know, is where we all come together to discuss climate issues and how we're going to push together. In 1989, it was said that if we did not address this issue of climate change, it would pose an existential threat. And they were saying in 1989 to do it now. 30 years later, what is so heartrending is when you look back at that Langkawi Declaration, which was signed by every single member of our Commonwealth. Everything they said in that declaration, everything they feared would come true, has come true. So this existential threat is real, and if you look at our region, we feel it. We've seen it.
Brace ourselves every year.
Every year. And now some of our children, when we hear that rain coming on the roof, you can see the children getting frightened because they understand the enormity of what's happening. We see the sea level rising. We're saying food security. So climate change is critically important to us. And when you look at the promises that have been made to say that we would have $100 billion worth of assistance, where is that money? And so we knew that our member states had to get their hands on that money. Adaptation is really important. How do we protect ourselves, not just for now, but for the future? You'll know that Antonio Guterres, myself, all of us have been saying at least 50% of that money has to be on adaptation to help us. But look at what's happened on debt. So climate change is one, but there's a direct correlation between the subject the suffering we've had from climate change and the amount of debt that we have incurred. Because when those hurricanes come, when we are hit by the drought, it doesn't take the debt with us. It leaves the debt, but it takes the bridges, the houses, the roads, everything that you invested in, and it dumps it. So we now need to have a new infrastructure, a financial infrastructure, which will deal with the debt, but also deal with the climate change. And so we created the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. And what that does is we put climate finance advisors in our countries to assist the countries to make the applications which will be successful. In the past, we were always making applications and they were never granted. We were spending millions of dollars trying to get at that money and we were not successful. Now we are, with just 1.5 million pounds. So you know the 1.5 to stay alive? That's all we had. We had 1.5 million. We've already delivered more than $44 million into the hands of our member states, but we have $760 million in the pipeline. But we've got to make practical things. I've been saying we've got Goliath-like problems, and the Secretariat's job, I think, is to make the perfectly weighted stone for David's sling.
Right.
And these are the things that we're doing, whether it's creating the disaster relief portal, teaching our people how do you deal with these issues, creating the sustainable debt tools, making the difference in very practical ways. Today, we are launching not just issues in relation to COVID-19, but we've got a database because you'll know that COVID-19 has devastated all of us. Only 1.4% of the vaccines are going to our small states. Mm-hmm. And if we don't get everyone vaccinated, the variants are going to be the big problem, the big, big problem. And many of our states are saying, I can't get the vaccines, I can't afford it. So we've now launched today a database which is going to help our countries to identify where the goods are, where the medicines are, to give relief.
Well, we're certainly going to need to leverage every inch of power, of advantages that we have against the COVID-19 pandemic. What do you see as the Commonwealth advantage?
Well, the Commonwealth advantage is there in trade. Back in 2015, we identified what is it about ourselves. And what we discovered is because we speak the same language, because we have the same parliamentary structure, infrastructure, the laws are the same, it gives us a level of interoperability that other people didn't have. So in the beginning, it was 19%. We've just done a review, and remember that we've lost probably about $345 billion worth of trade as a result of COVID. But what we have seen is the Commonwealth advantage has survived and is growing. So that advantage is what we now need to use to help us to build back better. And it is there. We hope that we were almost at $700 billion worth of inter-Commonwealth trade before COVID hit us. We now hope, and we've lost a lot, an awful lot, about 1.5 trillion overall trade generally, but we believe we will be back up to intra-Commonwealth trade to 700 billion by next year. And what we're hoping is if we can work together and really ramp up and take advantage of that advantage, we will be able to push the inter-Commonwealth trade up to 2 trillion by 2030. But it's going to take all of us. And what we're doing in the Secretariat is trying to create the modalities, the tools to enable us to get there. And digitalization is a big issue because it's an opportunity, but it's also a huge divide. And it's going to get bigger. So what we're also doing is how do we bridge that gap? And we're bridging it.
Well, you've had the wonderful occasion while you were here in Barbados to meet with 20 young people, the future Barbados. What was that like for you in terms of interacting with those young people who are focused on a bigger, better Barbados?
It was an inspiration because if you ever feel hopeless about our future, just meet those young people. They were dynamic, they were focused, they understood the issues in relation to climate change. They understood the need to use ICT, the digital space, and they were vibrant, but they were absolutely in line with what we are doing in the Commonwealth Secretariat. And you know, one of my biggest joys was to create the Secretary General's Youth Awards and the Secretary General's Innovation Awards. And I went while I was here to see Joshua Fort, who is one of the 15 winners of my SDG Innovation Awards, and it was amazing what that young man is doing.
Thank you so very much for spending some time with us, and we look forward to hosting you in Barbados anytime at all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to be here.
Today we've been talking to Commonwealth Secretary General, the Right Honourable Baroness Patricia Scotland, QC. And thank you so much for watching UNCTAD Conversations.